Hello and welcome to another edition of Motorcars Speed Shop. Been a while since we've been in here, doing a bunch of auction stuff, but we're going to talk about some new RC projects that we got coming down the pike, and one of them that we're going to hit up in the future is this little Red Cat Banshee. This thing kind of straddles the line between a hardcore rock crawling piece and a more, more hobby car. Thing's cool, four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering. It's a neat little piece and a good looking rig out of the box, but this is all going to get changed. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what this project actually was supposed to be, because I had this plan in the past and just purchased this thing on eBay. Got the heck of a deal on this thing. It must have been a demo piece, because it looks brand spanking new, but got a heck of a deal of it on the old eBay. So we're going to talk about this particular rig, which was what that car was actually supposed to be. And this thing kind of morphed into a weirder project than I thought. So I had driven this thing. One of my nephews had one of these cars, the little Banshee, and I loved it. I thought this thing's fun, it's enjoyable, and it's a nice little easy rock crawler to get going. And I kind of found this chassis online, which is what Endura makes these. Thought it looked cool. I didn't have a rock bouncer at the time. I got a couple of rock crawlers. If you've seen my TRX4 build with the full front four link deal, that was kind of my inner foray. TRX6 is actually what my first one was, but the first real build was that TRX4. So this was going to be my next one coming down the pike, and just to, another wintertime project when you don't have anything else to do in those winter months. And I thought this thing could be really, really fun. So let's take a peek at this car, because it completely changed after a while. So it's obviously got a lot of flex in it. It's not a bad piece, at least so far. I think it needs to come down a little bit. These shocks and everything were a bunch of takeoff stuff. In fact, that's what this project actually is a ton of takeoff stuff that I had already had. These wheels and tires were actually the original ones, or at least the original ones after the first go round of that build of the TRX4 from Traxxas. The steering servo, same deal. It came out of it, and I think even the transmitter and receiver came out of something else. I can't remember what that exactly came out of. Was going to do the Banshee thing, and then, part of my job is a lot of drive time, a lot of windshield time makes you think, and I thought, well, if I could make a budget where this would work, and I could build a car that was maybe way more hardcore versus something that was a little more hobby. So, kind of came up with a budget of what I was going to spend, and it ended up right in that budget of axles, transmission, four link. I forgot about the drive shaft deal. That would have blown that budget probably entirely, and this car would have been completely different. But it ended up happening. This thing, I ordered up the parts, and then it took a handful of months to try to get it to work, because you can buy one of these things already pre-built. That would have been way too easy. Why do that when you can go the hard route and make a bunch of nightmare headaches for yourself? So let's go down some of the stuff that were some of the biggest nightmare parts. These axles were probably one of the biggest ones. So these things are really inexpensive, and probably a reason why I keep snapping out axle shafts inside of them. I think it's more on the lines of if this thing turns too hard, because the first time it broke was actually in the house doing mild testing, just driving it around a little bit, and busted one of them. The second one was actually doing some rock crawling itself, which this thing, three-wheel drive, it obviously is not that good as a four-wheel drive setup. So I couldn't find a company that made them, and I can't remember what the heck company I ended up finding them for. I think they're Axial brand, or knockoff Axial axle shafts. They're super easy. Once you take the spindle and hub off of it, they'll slide right in, and they're real easy to change. It takes seconds. I just did some of them last night. I've really worked around. Last night was a lot of work with trying to get the steering on. This thing's not adjustable, so it's got a little bit of a toe in. I don't know if that'd be good or bad or indifferent, but trying to get it to where it doesn't turn as hard so we don't bust these axles is probably a big thing. Another thing about the Enduro chassis, there's not a whole lot of places to keep stuff, so I actually mounted up the battery tray up high, which is probably not good for CV or center of gravity, but I wanted it was the only place where you can kind of get it up out of the way, and I didn't want to put electronics up here a bunch because I didn't want you to see a bunch of wires. I wanted to look a little bit more like a car. So they're all tucked underneath here, which makes them pain in the butt to try to deal with as far as if you have to do any work with them. They're pretty well set up now, but in the beginning it is a kind of nightmare. So the trans and the engine actually, the engine's actually a takeout out of a Axial, the SMT. I built a kit chassis out of one of those. Hadn't done one of those since I was a kid, and so built one of those. And then once I got it done, and nothing against the Axial stuff, it was just, it seemed a little cheap for what I was trying to build, and I was afraid I was just going to end up ruining it. So I ended up selling it to somebody, and they loved the hell out of it, so it doesn't really matter. But a lot of parts, the 12 turn, I think it's 12 turn or maybe 10 turn. It's very powerful. It's not the greatest for crawling, but a rock bouncer, this thing definitely is. It really works well in that deal. It hops around just like a rock bouncer could. And I'm kind of tickled with the way it works. These axles, again, as much as I was bashing them, they're nice and beefy and nice and heavy. So this thing really works well, even with no weights inside of the wheels. It really, really works well, just over any rock, anywhere on the surface or anything. And it's got tons of flex, but that had to be a little bit of an issue because this top 4-link bar up in here, it actually kind of touches the engine a little bit, or at least it did. These big red 4-links, I had a set of these, but they were not adjustable, so I was having troubles with the axles being either too far, too back, and binding up the drivetrain. So end up switching to these little deals, and they work a ton better. But had to do a ton of clearancing, still had to do some clearancing to actually fix that. The trans is actually a place called, I think it's Facnoy, I think is what it's called. It's very inexpensive little thing, but I've had little to no trouble. I mean, absolutely no trouble with it, at least as of yet. So it's a pretty good piece. The axles themselves are actually Cupgavin, I think is what a Kerpa. I don't know what they are. Anyway, there's some little. They're cheap. I think I just looked them up online, like $70, something like that for a set. If you're gonna go this kind of project route, I'd probably, pop for another $40-50, try to get something maybe a little bit better, that'd work a little bit better for this thing. But the particular car, it works pretty good, and it looks pretty cool. Going to swap out some stuff. These are Losi LMT shocks. These are 130 millimeter, which is way too big. If this thing actually probably sat down about here, it would probably be a lot better, as far as the center of gravity and whatnot. It's not very difficult to flip this thing, especially for how narrow the track is. I mean, it's not the most wide car, so it does pretty good as far as just not wanting to flip over, because I don't think I've yet to turn this thing over, even though I've run it very, very slim. So these shocks will actually end up coming off, and they'll go on something else. Probably the TRX4. They worked really good on that thing, especially with how much weight that thing is up top. But it was a fun little project. It was an interesting piece, to put this thing together with a bunch of parts that I'd already had. Was, I don't know, it was pretty fun. And it was pretty neat to get to see the thing come together. A lot of troubles, a lot of, you don't really need to go through this much trouble. I think $150, $160. I think you can get a roller so you can throw an engine at it, your own electronics, wheels and tires, and you're up and running. So maybe a little bit too much the hard way. But I just had a ball building this thing. So we'll get some shots of it out and about and out running, and we'll show them to you that before I end up finally putting this thing up for sale and get rid of it and work on to the new project. That new Banshee is going to get a similar setup. I think Enduro makes a different chassis itself, I think that's what we're going to put on that thing. I probably will end up shortening that wheelbase because that Banshee is awfully, awfully long. But we'll see, and I'll do a little bit more of an in-depth type of deal where we'll show, kind of tearing it down and whatnot. So you get to see some of the stuff that we're going to do, at least step by step, a little bit more than just, hey, here's what I did, the problems or all the problems. Yeah, talk about them later. So neat little piece, and I have no idea what to call this because I don't know. It's got so many different kinds of parts in it. It really doesn't have a real good name. So pretty neat little piece, and somebody's going to enjoy this, I hope. Or if you're watching this video and you end up buying this thing, just realize there's a bunch of weirdo parts on this thing. So when I say weirdo, none of them go together. So you're going to have to be patient about trying to put stuff together to make it keep running. So pretty cool little piece, and we'll have some more here from the old Speed Shop coming up very, very soon, especially with that Banshee and some other good projects we got coming down the pike. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again real soon.